My name's Sal De Rienzo Jr. I graduated St. Joe's in the class of 2022. My current employer is FSA Federal. I'm a federal contractor and I work as a data analyst at the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York in their illicit finance and money laundering unit. So my current role entails helping to manage the Department of Justice's database of assets that are subject to forfeiture in our district. And so, what is forfeiture, you might ask? That's a process by which the government takes and keeps property that it's taken because it was involved in or facilitated or is the proceeds of a crime. And so within the broader forfeiture apparatus, I clean, collect, organize, manicure data corresponding to forfeitable assets in order to advance the forfeiture life cycle of assets. And then, if there are victims in a case, help return those funds to victims. And so a lot of my role entails data management, data classification for reporting purposes, which can impact federal policy and funding. And so I've been able to really work on an unbelievable variety of cases, including FTX and Sam Bankman Fried, as well as a corruption scandal within the New York Housing Authority, and also some sanctions cases. And so, in this role, I help to manage forfeiture in the context of these assets in these cases. So I didn't enter this field initially after college. Upon graduating from St. Joe's, I first did a year of service with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest, where I served as an asylum intake and legal coordinator at the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project in Seattle. And during my time at the organization, not only was I interviewing asylum seekers to try to analyze their eligibilities for immigration protections, but I also helped to manage a database for case referrals for asylum seekers who were survivors of torture. And so, in managing that database, I had gotten interested in database management and administration. And as I was searching for jobs upon my exit from the year of service, I came across this job at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and it was a really good fit, and I was happy to have found it. But in terms of typical, there really isn't a typical path. I mean, I came into it after doing a year of service. Some people come into it after graduating undergrad or graduating from grad school, and the people who I work with also have different career paths and trajectories. Some of whom are career paralegals, whereas some others are in the role for a couple of years before going off to law school or become a special agent or more grad school. And so there really isn't a typical path. I think really what the biggest commonality is that all of us are dedicated to serving the public interest through government administration. So I think really the biggest skill in landing a role, your especially your first role, is just persistence. There are a lot of people looking for the same job as you are. There are a lot of applicants in many roles where only one vacancy is needed to be filled. And so no matter how many good internships you've had, no matter how strong your resume is, no matter how good your grades are, uh, more often than not, you're going to get a couple of rejections. You're going to get a couple of non-answers. And I think the biggest tip is just, having thick skin with respect to that, because, it can be demoralizing when you're putting so much time and effort into those applications, those cover letters, and, you either get rejected with the standard boilerplate, thank you for applying, but sorry message, or just not hearing back. So persistence for me is the foundation. I think I want to touch on two other really important skills, and one is time management, and I've really been able to develop those in these roles, but I've also learned that a lot at St. Joe's from being involved in weekly service, student government, having a full case class load of classes, and being on different committees and extracurriculars. Time management is so key, because things are going to come at you left and right, and it feels overwhelming. And so to be able to juggle different tasks and prioritize and really triage your tasks to determine which ones are more important to which ones are less important is really pivotal to make sure that you succeed in your role. And then, in addition to time management and persistence, I would say just a willingness to learn and be engaged and ask questions. I mean, you're new, you're in the workforce, and no matter what position you have, no matter how much experience you have, you're never going to know everything. But especially when you're, fresh out of college, um, you haven't worked that 40-hour week, most likely, and so to just be eager and willing to ask questions, to learn from your colleagues, to show that you want to do a good job, and to put in the effort and the work to do that job. uh, those are the most important things, in my opinion, for when you're starting. And I also attribute that to St. Joe's, because I know that, professors and mentors were always encouraging to ask questions, to challenge preconceived notions, and to look more beyond the surface level of things, but to dig deep in your studies and your extracurriculars. And those skills have proved to be really invaluable for me. I think the best advice in terms of extracurricular activities for students is just to do things that they enjoy. When I was doing student government and weekly service, among other things at St. Joe's, I really wasn't doing it with my current role or career in mind. Quite frankly, I didn't know that what I'm doing today existed until I was applying for this role during my year of service. And so, really, what was most important for me was to do an activity or activities that I enjoyed. I felt like I was making a meaningful impact in the campus community. And regardless of what activities you do, there are going to be transferable skills that you gain from them, whether it's communication, time management, or anything else that can really transfer into whatever role you then pursue afterwards. So just being able to make that link. So when you're on your interviews or when you're writing your cover letters, to make the link that saying, "Hey, from activity X, I was able to develop this skill, which is going to help me for this position." My biggest tip in terms of networking is don't feel afraid and don't feel guilty. I think one of the hardest things when I first started networking, especially when I was an underclassman and I was networking with either upperclassmen or people who had just graduated, was that I almost felt guilty asking for questions, tips, advice, because I felt like I was getting from them, but I was giving nothing in return. And I think the great thing about St. Joe's is that there's really a pay it forward culture. And so even if the person who was giving me career advice didn't receive career advice back from me, I know from my experience that I've paid that advice forward by giving advice to current students when I was an upperclassman, or current students when I had graduated, giving them advice when they came asking me for it. So I think getting over that mental barrier and that roadblock, excuse me, is definitely the most pivotal starting point in my opinion. And then additionally, I would say leave as many doors open as you can. You know, make good connections with your professors. Typically, a student takes 5 classes. That's 5 different professors. That's 5 different people who you could add to your network. Get to know them, not just in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. Get to know, your fellow students and upperclassmen, and really learn from them and pick their brains about their experiences. On St. Joe's, as I'm sure the students know, the campus culture is very friendly, and really everybody wants to help everybody succeed. And so leverage that, because you're not going to get that everywhere. You're not going to get that everywhere once you leave St. Joe's. And so to be able to have that core, that foundation of a St. Joe's base is really helpful, and especially because St. Joe's grads, after they leave St. Joe's, they enter careers and industries in all different fields all over the country, and it's really beneficial to just stay in touch with the community, whether it's through an alumni network, whether it's through reaching out to peers and classmates. It's really beneficial. The biggest barrier that I faced entering this field was really finding the opportunity. I would say I had no clue what asset forfeiture was before I started, and I didn't even know such an opportunity existed. In reality, I was just searching on Indeed and LinkedIn as my year of service was concluding, trying to figure out what was next, and I was lucky enough to stumble across this opportunity. So I think that really harkens to 2 things. One, search different platforms, whether it's SJU's Handshake or whether it's Indeed, LinkedIn. Um, there are different jobs posted on different platforms that you otherwise may not have seen had you only stuck to one platform. And then also leveraging your network. Perhaps if I had if I had knew that I wanted to enter into this space while I was in college, I perhaps could have networked with the correct people who may or may not have guided me towards finding an opportunity such as this. So I think really the 2 big takeaways from this are networking and just look for new and different opportunities. And even if it maybe doesn't fit the mold of exactly what you had envisioned yourself doing, remember that, this is one of your first jobs out of college. You're going to gain really valuable experience. Keep on plugging along, because it's not a linear path to getting your first job. It really isn't. And there are some bumps in the road. And so don't let those barriers deter you. In terms of resources, I think the most important thing, especially in my role, where we have a bunch of different complex cases, anywhere from sanctions to crypto frauds to gang violence and organized crime. I think the biggest piece of advice in terms of resources is being aware of what's going on in the world around you. Reading, watching, listening to the news to know what's happening. Though that really is most pivotal for me in my role, and also recognizing that news sources are biased, and so um, consuming media from different sources, from sources that use data to back up their claims, and that are generally reliable. In For example, in my experience, what I like to do, especially because I commute about 2.5 hours every day round trip, I'll listen to podcasts. And so I'll listen to Reuters, the BBC, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, sources that generally are somewhere in or close to the middle of the spectrum, and use fact finding to substantiate their claims and their arguments. And doing that, consuming good sources and consuming a variety of good sources has really helped me in understanding the world around me, which is really important in the context of the cases that we see come through our office. The biggest piece of advice that I could give to students right now would be, you're on nobody's time frame but your own. I think coming out of college, having been in school your whole life and now entering the workforce, there's a lot of anxiety and nerves that comes with that, and perhaps a pressure that you put on yourself that I need to be in this role by this date. I need to be doing this by this date. I need to have taken this certification, or I need to have gotten this promotion, or I need to be living in this city, or a whole number of internal demands that we place on ourselves in reaction to what we see other people, whether they're posting it on social media or LinkedIn. And so I think sometimes we need to take a step back and realize that my path and my time frame is my own. And if what takes one person 1 year takes another person 2 years, takes another person 3 years, so be it. Don't feel like you have to keep yourself wedded to a particular internal time frame that you're imposing upon yourself. You have a really long career ahead of you, and there are going to be highs and lows along the way, but don't rush it because you feel like you have to, or because you feel like you're behind, because you're not. Everybody feels that way, and it's completely normal. And really just set out a plan for yourself, if that's helpful, and have check-ins with yourself to see how you're doing in pursuit of those goals, but never impose a constraint or a time frame upon yourself, because you feel like if you don't, then you're behind and everybody else is ahead of you. That's really the biggest piece of advice that I could give.